Welcome to Mediumship Moments with psychic medium Kim Durham. Join her as she shares her personal journey with mediumship, connects with your loved ones, and discusses topics dealing with spirituality.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm Kim Durham. I'm your host for Mediumship Moments, my podcast that talks about all the realms of spirituality. I'm second-gen psychic medium. I grew up with a mom who worked on murder cases, actually over 240 of them. And today, I'm starting a mini-series where I'm going to be talking about mediumship and murder and how people like me are utilized by federal, state, and local authorities to help give them pieces to a puzzle to help solve, either to bring home or to point in a direction where they should head next over a case. I want to highlight a case that was actually out in Washington State. And it was a student that was out there that went missing. And this is how I want to talk about cases coming to me. In this case, in this scenario, the aunt of the missing person, the young lady who was missing, reached out to my office. And she had been a client of my mom's. Now, at that time, my mom had already passed. This woman reached out and said, "Can you help? We're desperate." And the aunt lived in the tri-state area close to me, and it was she was able to get here rather quickly. So when people put a case in front of me, how does a case come to me? Well, a couple of ways, right? Federal, state, or local authorities could reach out and say, "Hey, Kim, we need help with this case. Do you have 10, 15 minutes? Can we send you something for you to sit with?" In this case, obviously, a family member reached out. Now, I'm hesitant to work with family members moving forward, and I'll explain why. It's a dilemma that working with a family member, there are things that I'm going to see, right? And there's two reasons of it. One, they don't have the training or the assets to work on a case. And what do I mean? Let's say I start to describe a suspect. I start to describe a house. I start to describe a car, maybe a partial license plate. They don't have the access to the system to be able to look that up. They end up driving around town, seeing if they can find that car, see if they can, find that location. And I don't want a family member knocking on a door and going, so to speak, rogue, and thinking that they, in their frustration and desperate moments, desperate actions, would in some way involve themselves in the case. So I'm hesitant to work with family members. I typically only work with cases that come to me through authorities. Because, as I said, they have the means to work on a case. In this situation with the case in Washington State, it came to me from a family member, and this was years ago. So when the aunt reached out to me, I often tell family members I need a few items to work with. It's kind of like a vetting process. And what do I mean? I'm earning my keep, so to speak. I will ask for some metal. Whether it's a key, a phone. Metal retains a lot of energy, and I talk about my ability of psychometry. When I hold on to an object, I start to see pages within the chapter of that person's life. And I could be describing her home. I could be describing the car she drives. These are all little pieces to the puzzle, and it, again, gives the authorities reasons to believe what I'm seeing, because I'm describing things that I'd have no access to. And that's why I call it the vetting process. I'll ask for a photograph of that person alone because, energetically, if there's more people in the picture, then I'm seeing more symbols around somebody's auric field. And you're like, what the hell's an auric field? It's a body of energy around. Kirlian photography has been able to capture it. But within that, if you will, energy field, I see symbols and I'll see pictures. And I know that sounds unusual, but, 'tis my world. And I'll start to describe where she's been, who she's been with. If I see things as a movie clip, then I know it's a bit of a red flag. It would be something that I would, warrant further investigation, shall we say. So the aunt came to my studio, brought those items that I'd asked for. And again, the vetting process begins where I'll sit down with each object. And here's the thing, I have to be cognizant that let's say they bring, a ring to me. I want it in a plastic bag that nobody else is touching because I can pull the energy from it, but I don't want to contaminate my energy on that object, especially with clothing. I ask that it's sealed because working on cases with cadaver dogs and with tracking dogs, I don't want to mess up their scent of the person that they're trying to find. So there's a process that I asked for these items to be put in. She brought numerous things with her, a photograph, a watch I worked with, and I started to describe a location that was not in this area. I call it the upside down Christmas trees in Washington State. For anybody who's out there in the West Coast, I call them upside down Christmas trees. So the information that I relayed to her prompted a phone call. In fact, I stepped out of the room to allow her the time to do it. And there was a team already being put together of other authorities and people with these special talents, whether it was a private investigator they were working with. And that gentleman had previously worked for, I believe, the FBI, so he was well vetted. And Mel Helmlick, who had K9 cadaver dogs, she came out of Arkansas. Mel came and met me in Washington State. And there was a few other people as well that were there to work on the case. So a team of us are out there being brought out sight. This young lady was well loved and had numerous connections within the entertainment department or field, I should say. Collectively, there was a lot of people and resources that could help on this case. There's a show out there called The First 48 Hours. That's tremendously important. In this situation, this case had the right people and the right resources within where she went missing. The vetting process, I'm out. Now, I've used psychometry. I want to talk about something called remote viewing versus on-site. Okay. So when I work on a case, and this case that came to me, and I sat with the objects, I will ask for, sometimes if I'm staying at my office, I use an ability called remote viewing. And what that's like for me, it's like putting virtual reality goggles on, and I can start to see energetically which way they've gone. And what I'll ask for is a 3D, sometimes a map, just a Google Earth. I don't want just give me a Google Earth last seen, and I'll give them a direction. It's like I can see the energy trail that, direction that they went. I started to describe the scene itself, people, just by doing psychometry and remote viewing. The ability of, the parapsychology, I can see remote people, places, and objects while I'm in a different zip code. If you want to read up on it, Pam Coronado is an amazing psychic medium, and David Morehouse. Remote viewing is used a lot in murder cases where I don't have the ability to travel. Remote viewing gives me the opportunity to tell the authorities, I can get you in the neighborhood. Okay, I can get you in the town and the neighborhood. Let's put it that way. Now, let's say I'm on site. And what's the difference? Well, if you take me to the spot, in this case, to the last place that she was seen, I actually walked a couple of blocks before that. We were headed there. And I walked into a grocery store and went down the second aisle, and I went down the same aisle and the same register that she did, because I can see and sense the energy, and I follow that energy trail. It's kind of like scent dogs, if you will. But being on site, working a murder case or a missing persons case, it is that psychic impulse and that energy that is far greater. I'm at the site of where she was. It's kind of like I can see it. There's like a deposit of energy and a cachet of film imprinted there. So I'll stand at that spot and just, do my thing, and I'll start to pick up pictures. And in this case, I knew about, I believe it was a small red car that several people had been in, that she had gotten a ride. I was picking up that car and that energy of her being there. Um, and when I said about the 48 hours, the sooner I'm involved in a case, the better off. Only because memories are fresh for psychic energy, but for your witnesses that you have. But that's not always the case, and I understand. But in this case, I was working with Mel. We were out tracking. Um, and at that time, the Green River killer hadn't been found. There was talk of us finding a body that wasn't attached to this case. I've often said my mom had it harder, right? She was a pioneer. There wasn't a lot of mediums doing this and working with authorities. They think I'm out to seek um, some kind of notoriety. I have more cases, and so does another well-known medium who I'm working with, than we know what to do with. If I can spare 15, 20, a half an hour to work on a case with a police officer, I'm doing that out of the grace that there, but for the grace of God go I, that premise, if you will. I was thankful, that my mom had a lot of detectives, especially down in Florida, that were, she's incredible. I don't know how she does this, but she gives us pieces of the puzzle, and hell, I'll take any help I can get. And those are the kind of authorities that I want to work with. Just keep an open mind. I can't always explain what it's like to be me. I can explain what works best, um, due to my history of working on cases, but just to have an open mind about working with a medium. Um, so, being down at the site, working with the dogs, tracking, we went out to some remote areas, absolutely stunning, gorgeous areas. And I can remember seeing images of her walking. If you've ever been out to the Washington State, it's gorgeous. I brought them to areas and locations that were connected with somebody who was connected to her. And I'm trying not to tell you too much because the case is still open. Okay. The case is still open. And that pains me. This beautiful, amazing young lady, was an incredible student, an incredible life ahead of her. And the family is left not knowing, that's tough. That's tough. As a parent myself, I can't imagine what that's like. When I work on cases such as this, now, is there a difference between mediumship and missing persons cases, mediumship and murder cases? A little bit. The missing persons cases, they typically, and I say this, if they get to me early, we find them early. And it's just something I've noticed. If you get to me early, we find them early. Now, when I work on cold case murders, there's cases that have been reopened that authorities have came to me and asked me to work on the case. And because of the information I gave them, they've reopened the case and there's been progress. These cases are difficult emotionally to be a mom, a nurse, and to there, but for the grace of God go I. It's difficult. It is difficult. But if I can use my remote viewing, which is, being able to see a location. There's a case out in Arizona that I drew pictures, and they use those pictures to know which direction to go and find that person. There's many cases that I work on, whether they're cold case, whether they're serial killers, whether they're missing persons. But really using a medium, you've got these shows out here that are CSIs and truly I don't watch them. It's just, I don't want to know the process of how a police officer works. I just know how I work and how they could utilize me for a case, right? But do I need to know the inner workings? No. I don't tend to watch those shows. People ask me, "Oh my God, is it like this?" And I go, "I wouldn't know. I just know that if I can help someone with this ability and give them the information, then I think you know they're trained to be able to bring them." Now, I will continue to revisit cases. People, unfortunately, the longer they're missing, the smaller the window of opportunity that I see And that's based upon many factors, not only time, but also resources. A lot of government funding has gone away for police officers and police departments. So there's just not enough money there to train detectives to take these classes to have this ability. They're like, oh, well, there's never been a murder here in 20 years, so why do we need a detective trained in it? And then something happens, right? And you don't want to be that family member that is stuck in that position. Mediumship and murder, it's something that it takes a large part of my energy and my ability. It is draining emotionally and physically. When I was on site, going out every day was just exhausting. Exhausting. You're drained. There's nothing more in the tank. And people are like, well, what do you mean? It's energy. If I'm working a case for 2 days, 3 days, I need a day off after that. I need to sit and do something else to recharge. I have talked to others that work in the field, such as myself, medium, and they feel the same way. 3 days is pretty much our max because it's so exhausting. I have found people, I have found remains of people. But it's not about me, right? It's not, this is a team. And I hope by talking about cases that anybody that's out there that's a police officer, detective, that you think of it as a team. Hey, I don't know exactly how the hell she does it, but she described this person, gave a name, and drew the picture of the home. I knew the mailbox was tinted, slanted, was broken, like those little fine details. And let's give it a shot. And that's all I ask, is that you come with an open mind. Like I said, my mom worked on over 240 murder or missing persons cases in her time, and that was a huge resume given the lateness of when she started and the less than opportune environment that people wanted to work with her. So I don't think I have as hard as my mom did. Me being a nurse, I think helps as well. There's a compartmentalizing of working on cases that I can be hyper focused and then hopefully keep it there. There have been cases that I've worked on that remind me of my family members. A case that I worked on reminded me of my brother. And a case I worked on reminded me of my daughter. I'm human. So that takes an emotional toll as well. Mediumship and murder is, part of this ability. And I enjoy the work, and I say enjoy in the sense of being able to use this ability to help families. Yes, I have found missing people. I've found missing animals. The toughest cases, though, are the cold cases, but it's good that we're getting movement. I think technology, what comes to the table, of what we can use now technology-wise, the X-ray, I was in a case in Florida. We used the X-ray, ground-penetrating X-ray, and found things that I had said were there. It wasn't for the detectives to say, hey, she knew that the victim was in Colorado a week before she died, and not even the family knew that. Let's do this, and I appreciate the willingness to do that. I know the resources, and no one wants to have, so to speak, egg on their face, when you go down a path and it doesn't lead to something. But I can't work in that realm that, oh, am I right? I'm not right. I'm not. I have to see what I say and say what I see. Boom. And it's just like that. I can't get my ego in the way or ponder, vacillate over what I'm being shown. Basically, just tell them everything I see, hear, and feel. So this case out in Washington State was one of my early ones and one of the most challenging, and is still open, unfortunately. I always say a prayer to those families for allowing me to work on those cases. Think about those family members that have had to walk that difficult path. There are many out there that have lost loved ones that disappeared. They have no idea where they are, or they find them later but don't know what happened. Think about using a medium, just as an opportunity to shed some light on that case. I want to leave you here with this mediumship moment on this new mini series that I'm launching called Mediumship and Murder. I want to talk about a moment of working on this case where It was actually a family member. This is going to sound incredible, but when I'm in the process or in the surroundings of a family member, so let's say the child's missing and I'm with the family, mother, father, other loved ones will come through who have crossed and speak to me as a medium and tell me that they're on the other side and that they're okay. It's almost like a mediary. In this case, I remember the grandfather coming through, and the grandfather was showing me specific things about her and conveying messages to me. Now, I never want to take hope away from a family. I've seen far too many miracles in the operating room but in this case, it was a mediumship moment that a loved one who had preceded this missing person had actually came through and gave me information that I used in the case. I thank you for listening. I thank you for taking a little bit of your day and sharing it with me and listening to Mediumship Moments podcast. Coming up, I have some more mini-series about this case and other people. Stay tuned, listen, and as always, I say, if you're chatting with your angels, keep doing so because they can hear you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time for another episode of Mediumship Moments. If you enjoyed this episode of Kim's podcast, check her out on Instagram and TikTok at Kim Durham Medium.